The morning sun filters through heavy curtains in the grand Victorian mansion, casting long shadows across polished mahogany floors that have witnessed decades of family secrets. Family portraits line the walls, generations of the Wellington family staring down with cold, judgmental eyes that seem to follow every movement throughout the house. The silence is deafening, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of an antique grandfather clock that has marked time through countless family tragedies, each tick a reminder of moments that can never be reclaimed. Margaret Wellington, 67, sits rigid in her leather armchair, her fingers clutching a delicate china teacup with such force that her knuckles have turned white. Her silver hair is pulled back in a severe bun that hasn't changed style in 30 years, and her pale blue eyes scan the empty dining room where 4 place settings remain untouched, each one representing a family member who should be present, but isn't. The chair at the head of the table, her husband's chair, sits vacant, as it has for the past 3 years since his death. But the emptiness extends beyond just his absence. The entire room feels hollow, as if the very walls have absorbed years of unspoken tensions and buried resentments that continue to poison the atmosphere even in silence. The dining room itself tells a story of wealth built on foundations that were never meant to be examined too closely. Crystal decanters filled with expensive liquor sit untouched on an antique sideboard, their contents growing more potent with age while the family's ability to communicate honestly has deteriorated. Beyond repair, the Persian rug beneath the mahogany table bears stains from spilled wine and tears shed during countless family gatherings that devolved into psychological warfare disguised as dinner conversation. A massive crystal chandelier hangs overhead, like a glittering monument to the family's obsession with appearances, its hundreds of cut glass pieces casting fractured rainbows across the room while catching the dust particles that float in the air like forgotten memories. The walls are adorned with expensive artwork purchased not for beauty, but for status. Original oil paintings by artists whose names carry weight in social circles, their dark themes of suffering and isolation reflecting the psychological landscape of the family that chose them. Family photographs in ornate silver frames seem to mock the current emptiness of the house, each image capturing moments of forced smiles and posed perfection that hide the dysfunction brewing beneath the surface. In one corner, a grandfather clock chimes 8 o'clock, its deep resonant tone echoing through the hollow chambers of what was once a home filled with the sounds of childhood laughter, but now serves as a mausoleum to dreams that died slow, painful deaths under the weight of family expectations and psychological manipulation. The morning routine that once provided structure to the Wellington household has been shattered beyond repair. Coffee grows cold in expensive Wedgwood china cups, their floral patterns seeming to wilt under the weight of abandonment. The kitchen, once the heart of domestic life, now resembles a crime scene frozen in time. Breakfast preparations remain, half finished on the marble countertop, eggs still in their carton, bread left beside an unplugged toaster, orange juice growing warm in cut crystal glasses that catch the morning light and throw it back in sharp, accusing angles. The front door creaks open with the weight of dread, and footsteps echo across the marble foyer like funeral drums, announcing the arrival of mourners. Sarah Wellington Cross, 34, enters with hurried steps that betray her desperate need to find answers in a house that has always specialized in hiding truth. Her designer heels click against the floor with metronomic precision, each step a futile attempt to maintain some semblance of control in a situation that has spiraled completely beyond anyone's grasp. Her perfectly styled blonde hair is slightly disheveled for the first time in years, and her hands shake with the fine tremor of someone who has discovered that the ground beneath her feet was never as solid as she believed. Dark circles under her eyes suggest sleepless nights filled with questions that have no answers, and memories that may not be reliable, and her usually immaculate appearance shows signs of stress that no amount of expensive cosmetics can conceal. Sarah's clothing tells its own story. The designer suit that would normally be pressed to perfection now shows wrinkles that speak of hours spent hunched over missing person reports and police statements. Her jewelry, usually carefully coordinated, appears hastily. thrown on, as if the normal rituals of vanity have become meaningless in the face of her brother's disappearance. The way she moves through the house suggests someone who is simultaneously intimately familiar with every corner and completely lost within its walls, as if the home she grew up in has transformed overnight into foreign territory filled with potential clues and hidden dangers. Behind her, Michael Wellington, 28, follows with the gait of a man who has been carrying invisible weights for so long that he no longer remembers what it feels like to stand upright. His shoulders slump with the burden of secrets that threaten to crush him, and his vacant eyes suggest someone who has retreated so far inside himself that the outside world has become a distant, barely relevant concern. His once pressed shirt is wrinkled beyond the point where it could be explained by a single restless night, and stubble covers his usually clean-shaven face like a physical manifestation of his internal deterioration. He moves like someone navigating through water, each step deliberate yet uncertain, as if the very act of forward motion requires conscious effort and decision-making that has become almost impossibly difficult. Michael's hands remain stuffed, deep in his pockets, not from casual comfort, but from a desperate need to hide their constant trembling. His fingernails have been bitten down to the quick, a nervous habit that has intensified dramatically since James's disappearance, and small cuts on his knuckles suggest he has been engaging in behaviors that border on self-harm. He avoids eye contact with anyone in the room, not out of shyness, but because he fears that his eyes might reveal knowledge that he is not ready to share, secrets that could destroy what little remains of their family structure if brought to light. The kitchen remains frozen in time like a tableau of interrupted normalcy. Breakfast plates still arranged on the marble counter with the precision that characterized Dr. James Wellington's approach to every aspect of his organized life. Coffee has grown cold in expensive porcelain cups, their delicate handles still positioned at perfect angles, as if waiting for hands that will never return to complete the morning ritual. A half-eaten piece of toast sits on a plate decorated with hand-painted roses, next to an opened newspaper whose headlines now seem as ancient as archaeological artifacts, despite being only 3 days old. Morning routine of Dr. James Wellington, 38, the eldest son and reluctant family patriarch since his father's unexpected death, has been abruptly interrupted and will never be resumed, leaving behind only these small, heartbreaking remnants of a life that once seemed so carefully controlled and predictable. The newspaper itself tells a story of a world that has continued spinning despite the Wellington family's personal catastrophe. Stock market reports, political scandals, and weather forecasts fill pages that James will never read, their irrelevance to his current situation creating a surreal contrast to the earth-shattering significance of his absence for those he left behind. A coffee mug bearing the logo of his psychological practice sits next to his reading glasses, still folded in the precise manner that characterized his approach to every detail of his daily existence. The morning vitamins he took religiously remain in their weekly dispenser, each compartment labeled with days of the week that have become meaningless in his absence. In the study, leather-bound books line floor-to-ceiling shelves with the obsessive organization of someone who found comfort in intellectual order when emotional chaos threatened to overwhelm him. Their spines bear the names of psychological pioneers: Jung, Adler, Freud, Klein, and dozens of other theorists whose insights into human behavior had become both James's professional tools and his personal prison. The complete works of Sigmund Freud occupy a place of honor at eye level, their worn bindings indicating countless hours of study and reference. Particularly well-thumbed volumes include The Interpretation of Dreams, Beyond the Pleasure Principle, and Family Romances, the last one bookmarked at passages dealing with the psychological dynamics of dysfunctional family systems. A mahogany desk sits in the center of the study like a command post for psychological warfare, its surface meticulously organized with patient files arranged in perfect alphabetical order, psychological journals dating back to James's graduate school years, and handwritten notes in the precise cursive that he had learned from his father and grandfather before him. An expensive fountain pen lies uncapped next to an unfinished letter, the ink long since dried into a permanent reminder of words that will never be completed. The letter begins with "My dearest family," but contains only a few lines about the need for honesty in relationships before ending abruptly mid-sentence, as if the writer had suddenly realized that honesty might be more dangerous than silence. The walls of the study are covered with James's diplomas and professional certifications, each one representing years of education and training that had supposedly prepared him to understand the human psyche, but had ultimately failed to protect him from the psychological landmines hidden within his own family history. A photograph of him receiving his doctorate in psychology sits prominently on the desk, showing a younger man whose smile seemed genuine and whose eyes held hope for a future where his knowledge might help heal the world's psychological wounds. The contrast between that hopeful young scholar and the man who would eventually feel compelled to disappear without a trace is stark and heartbreaking. Personal items scattered throughout the study reveal the complexity of James's internal world. In the months leading up to his disappearance, a stress ball sits next to his computer keyboard, worn smooth from constant use. Prescription bottles for anxiety medication are hidden in a desk drawer, their contents suggesting that James had been struggling with mental health issues that he had carefully concealed from his family and colleagues. A small recording device sits next to his telephone, its memory filled with sessions where James practiced difficult conversations, rehearsing confrontations that he apparently never found the courage to initiate. The family gathers in the living room with the reluctant gravity of people who have run out of places to avoid each other. Their movements are awkward and strained, like actors who have forgotten their lines in a play that has been running too long. Margaret maintains her rigid posture, with the determination of someone who believes that physical control can somehow impose order on an emotional situation that has spiraled completely beyond anyone's ability to manage. Her eyes remain fixed on the empty doorway, as if willing James to walk through it could somehow undo the reality of his absence and restore the carefully maintained facade of family normalcy that had taken decades to construct. Sarah paces near the window with the restless energy of someone who has discovered that action, even meaningless action, is preferable to the crushing helplessness of sitting still. She occasionally pulls back the heavy velvet curtain to peer outside at the empty driveway, hoping to see James's car pulling up to the house, as if the last 3 days had been nothing more than a terrible nightmare. Her movements are sharp and jerky, lacking the fluid grace that had once characterized her carefully cultivated public persona. The window she stares through overlooks a garden that James had tended with the same meticulous care he brought to his psychological practice, its flowers now beginning to wilt without his attention, providing a visual metaphor for the decay that has begun to spread through every aspect of the family's existence. Michael slouches in a corner chair that has become his default position during family gatherings, his body language broadcasting his desire to disappear entirely from the scene unfolding around him. His gaze alternates between his phone and the floor, unable to sustain eye contact with either his mother or sister for more than a few seconds. The phone in his hands buzzes repeatedly with messages and calls from friends and colleagues who have heard about James's disappearance, but he ignores them all, too overwhelmed by his own internal turmoil to engage with the outside world's expressions of concern and curiosity. The living room itself bears witness to the family's deteriorating emotional state. Usually pristine surfaces are now cluttered with papers related to the missing person investigation, police reports, witness statements, photographs of James's abandoned car, and maps marking locations where he might have gone. The coffee table that once held carefully arranged magazines and fresh flowers is now covered with manila folders and legal documents that transform the elegant space into an impromptu command center for a search that feels increasingly hopeless. With each passing hour, a manila folder sits prominently on the coffee table marked "Missing Person Report, Dr. James Wellington," in the careful handwriting of a police clerk who has processed too many such cases. Police photographs spill from its edges like scattered memories. Images of James's car found abandoned at the edge of town, keys still in the ignition, wallet and phone left behind on the passenger seat. The driver's seat has been pushed back, farther than James's usual setting, suggesting that someone taller had been driving, though whether that someone was James himself in a state of psychological distress or another person entirely remains one of many unanswered questions. The photographs reveal details that the family finds both comforting and disturbing. James's coffee cup sits in the cup holder, still containing the dregs of his morning beverage, suggesting that his departure from normalcy was not planned far in advance. His briefcase remains in the back seat, filled with patient files for appointments he would never keep and research materials for a presentation he would never give. Most mysteriously, his watch, a family heirloom passed down from his grandfather, has been left on the dashboard, as if he had deliberately chosen to abandon not just his current life but his connection to his family's history. The silence grows, heavier with each passing minute, as each family member retreats deeper into their own thoughts and fears. Margaret's fingers trace the rim of her teacup in repetitive circles, a nervous habit that has intensified dramatically since James's disappearance, began to transform her carefully controlled world into a landscape of uncertainty and dread. The circular motion of her finger against the porcelain creates a soft, rhythmic sound that becomes almost hypnotic, as if she is attempting to cast a spell that might bring her eldest son back through sheer force of repetitive will. Sarah's phone buzzes repeatedly with calls from reporters, concerned friends, and well-meaning acquaintances who have heard about the disappearance through social media and local news coverage. She ignores each call, her attention focused on something only she can see outside the window, perhaps a memory of James as a child playing in the garden, or a fantasy of him returning home with a simple explanation that will make all of their current suffering disappear like morning mist. Her breathing is shallow and rapid, suggesting the onset of panic attacks that have become a regular occurrence since James vanished. The house itself seems to participate in the family's grief, its walls absorbing the weight of unspoken fears and releasing them back into the atmosphere as an almost palpable sense of dread. Rooms that once felt welcoming now seem cavernous and cold, despite the expensive heating system that maintains a constant temperature. The familiar sounds of daily life, the refrigerator's hum, the grandfather clock's ticking, the settling of old wood, have become amplified and ominous, as if the house is straining to fill the vacuum left by James's absence. Upstairs, James's bedroom remains preserved like a shrine to interrupted routine. Every detail maintained exactly as he left it on the morning he disappeared. His bed is made with military precision, the corners tucked and the surface smooth enough to bounce a coin, reflecting the discipline and control that had characterized every aspect of his visible life. Clothes hang in his walk-in closet in perfect order, organized by color and season, with the obsessive attention to detail that had allowed him to maintain an illusion of control over his existence, even as his internal world crumbled under the weight of family secrets and psychological pressure. On his nightstand, a framed photograph of him receiving his doctorate in psychology sits next to a well-worn copy of The Interpretation of Dreams and a leather-bound journal that the police had somehow overlooked during their initial investigation. The journal's pages are filled with increasingly desperate attempts to understand the psychological patterns that had shaped his family for generations, his handwriting becoming more erratic and emotional as the entries progressed toward the date of his disappearance. The final entry, written in the early hours of the morning before he vanished, contains observations about family dynamics and psychological patterns that seem to predict his own fate with chilling accuracy. Personal items scattered throughout the bedroom tell the story of a man who had been preparing for something, though whether that something was a psychological breakthrough or a complete break from reality remains unclear. Prescription bottles hidden in his bathroom cabinet reveal a growing dependence on anxiety medication and sleeping pills. A suitcase sits in his closet, partially packed with clothes and personal items, as if he had been planning a trip but had been unable to decide what kind of journey he was embarking upon. Books on family psychology and trauma recovery are stacked on his dresser, their pages marked with yellow highlighter and filled with handwritten notes in the margins. Titles like Toxic Parents, The Drama of the Gifted Child, and Breaking the Cycle of Abuse suggest that James had been researching his own family situation with the same clinical detachment he brought to his patients' problems. A manila envelope hidden beneath his mattress contains genealogical research documenting patterns of mental illness, suicide, and mysterious deaths within the Wellington lineage dating back 5 generations. The dining room clock chimes 9 times, its deep resonance marking another hour of uncertainty and growing desperation. Margaret finally breaks the suffocating silence, her voice barely above a whisper as she begins to ask questions that hang in the air, like accusation and prayer combined. Her words reveal a pattern of family dysfunction that stretches back through generations of Wellingtons, each sentence painting a picture of emotional manipulation, hidden secrets, and psychological warfare disguised as family love and loyalty. Her questions are not really questions at all, but rather statements disguised as inquiries, each one designed to shape the narrative of James's disappearance in ways that protect the family's reputation and maintain the carefully constructed facade that has hidden their dysfunction for decades. She speaks of James's sensitivity and his tendency toward dramatic gestures, using language that subtly pathologizes his decision to leave, while absolving the family of any responsibility for creating the conditions that made his escape feel necessary. Sarah's composure, already fragile from 3 days of sleepless nights and growing panic, begins to crack completely as she recounts the last conversation she had with James. Her voice trembles with the effort of maintaining control while describing his growing paranoia in the weeks leading up to his disappearance, his constant questioning about family memories that didn't align with her own carefully maintained recollections of their childhood. She speaks of late-night phone calls where James would ramble about psychological concepts and family patterns that seemed to consume his thoughts, his voice taking on an urgent, almost manic quality that had frightened her even as she dismissed his concerns as professional stress and overwork. The conversation Sarah describes reveals James's growing awareness of discrepancies in the family's collective memory, his increasing suspicion that events from their childhood had been systematically rewritten or erased to protect certain family members from consequences of their actions. He had begun questioning Sarah about specific incidents. A family vacation that she remembered as wonderful, but he recalled as traumatic. Birthday parties that seemed joyful in her memory, but filled him with inexplicable dread, and family photographs that appeared normal to her but triggered anxiety attacks in him that he couldn't explain or control. Sarah's account of these conversations reveals her own role as an unwitting accomplice in the family's system of psychological control. She had been trained from childhood to dismiss James's concerns as oversensitivity, to redirect his attention away from uncomfortable topics, and to reinforce the official family narrative even when doing so required her to ignore evidence of her own eyes and ears. Her distress at recounting these conversations stems not just from worry about James's current safety, but from a growing awareness that her own memories and perceptions may have been systematically manipulated throughout her entire life. Michael finally looks up from his phone, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow with the weight of knowledge he cannot share and guilt he cannot escape. His body language speaks of a man haunted by secrets that have shaped his entire existence, his nervous fidgeting and inability to maintain eye contact revealing his awareness that he possesses information that could potentially explain James's disappearance, but sharing it would require him to expose truths that could destroy what little remains of their family structure. The way Michael flinches whenever James's name is mentioned indicates a complex relationship filled with unresolved conflicts and buried resentments that go far deeper than typical sibling rivalry. His reaction suggests someone who has been carrying guilt about his treatment of his older brother, perhaps recognizing too late that James's attempts to protect and guide him had been met with hostility and rejection that may have contributed to his ultimate decision to disappear. Michael's silence is not the comfortable quiet of someone who has nothing to contribute, but the painful restraint of someone who knows that speaking truthfully would require him to confront aspects of his family history that he has spent years trying to forget or deny. His drinking, which has increased dramatically since James's disappearance, serves as both a coping mechanism and a form of self-punishment for his perceived failures as a brother and as a keeper of family secrets. The afternoon light shifts through the tall windows, creating moving shadows that seem to dance across the family portraits with almost malevolent intent. Each painting tells a story of Wellington family history that takes on new and sinister meaning in the context of James's disappearance. Stern patriarchs whose authority went unquestioned, submissive matriarchs whose silence enabled systematic abuse, and children who learned early that love came with conditions and loyalty was expected regardless of the cost to their own psychological well-being. The progression of portraits shows a pattern of psychological control passed down through generations like a genetic inheritance, each face bearing the same cold, calculating expression that suggests an understanding of power dynamics and emotional manipulation that has been refined over decades of practice. The women in the paintings display a particular type of beauty that seems frozen and artificial, their smiles never reaching their eyes, their poses suggesting performance rather than genuine emotion. The children in family group portraits appear unnaturally still and serious, their eyes holding shadows that seem inappropriate for their young ages. Margaret rises from her chair with the slow, deliberate movements of someone who has aged years in a matter of days, walking to the mantelpiece, where she picks up a silver-framed photograph of James as a child. Her fingers trace the glass surface as she speaks of her eldest son, with a mixture of pride and possession that reveals the toxic dynamics at play in their relationship. Her words about James's childhood paint a picture of a boy who was never allowed to simply be a child, who carried adult responsibilities and emotional burdens from an early age, who served as a confidant for his mother's problems and a caretaker for his younger siblings before he had developed the psychological resources to handle such roles. The photograph shows James at age 7, standing between his parents at some formal family event, his small hand gripping his father's jacket with white knuckles while his eyes stare directly into the camera with an intensity that seems unnatural for a child his age. His expression suggests someone who has already learned that safety depends on hypervigilance, that relaxation is a luxury he cannot afford, and that his value to the family rests on his ability to meet adult expectations that were never meant for children to bear. Margaret's reminiscences about James's childhood reveal a pattern of parentification that had stolen his innocence and burdened him with responsibilities that should have belonged to adults. She speaks proudly of his early maturity, his ability to comfort her during her marriage difficulties, his skill at managing his younger siblings when she was unable to cope with the demands of motherhood. What she presents as evidence of James's special qualities and advanced development actually paints a picture of a child who had been forced to become an adult before he understood what childhood was supposed to feel like. The kitchen timer, forgotten since the morning James disappeared, suddenly goes off with a shrill sound that cuts through the heavy atmosphere like a scream. Sarah moves to silence it, and the normalcy of the domestic task creates a jarring contrast to the abnormal situation they are struggling to comprehend. As she stands in the kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of interrupted routine, her facade of composure finally crumbles completely under the weight of accumulated stress and growing awareness that her understanding of her family may have been fundamentally flawed from the beginning. Her breakdown is sudden and complete, 3 days of suppressed emotion erupting in a torrent of sobs that seem to come from somewhere deeper than grief for her missing brother. The tears she sheds carry the salt of a lifetime of suppressed doubt, buried questions, and ignored instincts that had tried to tell her that something was fundamentally wrong with their family dynamic, but had been systematically silenced by a system that rewarded compliance and punished curiosity. As evening approaches, the house grows darker despite the expensive lighting system that automatically adjusts to maintain perfect illumination throughout every room. The advancing darkness seems to seep into the souls of the family members, as they confront the possibility that James's disappearance may not be the temporary crisis they had hoped, but rather a permanent severing of ties that had been strained to the breaking point for years before finally snapping under pressure that had become unbearable. Each family member retreats to their own space within the house, but the walls that were once solid barriers now seem permeable, making true privacy impossible. Margaret returns to her bedroom, where she sits surrounded by photo albums and family memorabilia, desperately searching for clues and images that may have been staged